Hey there, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement and bringing you another episode of Tuesday Training. And if you are ready to bring the absolute best fitness and adapted PE programs to the autism and neurodiverse athletes that you are working with, and by the way, that term athlete means anybody who is moving on a regular basis and getting better at it. That being said, if you are ready, head on over to autismfitness.com. The link is in the description for this video below, and you can get started right now to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro and join me for your live virtual practical wherever you are in the world so that you can get the hands-on, brains-on training that you and your athletes deserve. So in today's Tuesday training, we're going to be talking about warm-ups. Now, what do we do for a warm-up? What makes sense for our athletes? What suffices as a sufficient and effective warm-up? So a lot of people start with stretching. If you are incorporating stretching, my question to you is a simple one. Why? What is the purpose? And stretching has this nebulous kind of place. Well, why do we stretch? Oh, to create flexibility. Stretching doesn't necessarily do that, particularly for our autism and neurodiverse athletes who are not going to maintain the appropriate stretch or are not going to hold that position. So stretching isn't just this thing that we can have someone do and automatically it has this beneficial effect. So we say, all right, well, we're going to stretch the arm out and we're going to stretch the hip out and we're going to stretch the leg out. Question is why? What is it actually doing? So if you can answer that question with a reasonable purpose or line item of purposes, oh, we're stretching for, again, what's the reason? And we also have to ask whether stretching is going to actually have the outcome that we want prior to doing power and strength-based exercises. Stretching has occupied this place where we sometimes think, oh, automatically, well, not we, but people sometimes think, oh, automatically, well, you have to stretch before you train because otherwise you're going to get hurt. Well, is that really the case? And is that what research shows? Is that what actually happens with athletes, with the general population, general movement population in the real world? So there's an assumption that is being made about stretching, and then what type of stretching also. Oh, we're going to stretch the hamstring. Is the hamstring actually being stretched? Is that athlete, particularly when we're talking about the autism and neurodiverse population, is that athlete actually performing the stretch? Are they getting some type of lengthening of the muscle tissue in the hamstring? Is it actually doing this thing? Or are we just kind of moving around and assigning it the label stretching? So in autism fitness programming, you will find that we don't do any stretching. I professionally am not a big fan of it, especially for this population. In the first 5 or 6 or 7 minutes of a session, I would much rather mobilize have my athletes mobilize through a full range of motion. That's why we have the warm-up and mobility exercises that we do in the curriculum. Rather have the athlete stop and then lie on the ground and pretend to stretch. Really, that's what it is pretending to stretch. And again, what benefit is it going to have? When we think of a warm-up, if we distill it down to what we want out of it and what we want for our athletes out of it, it's really this: getting the body ready for more challenging movements in a similar pattern. Again, getting the body ready for similar movements in the same pattern at a more challenging variation. That's what we're looking for. And that's why we select the warm-up exercises that we do in Autism Fitness, and I'm going to show a couple of them to you as well, because stretching, for the most part, is a waste of time for our athletes. Oftentimes with stretching, what we're getting, especially when we hold that position, is an isometric contraction of that muscle. So it's stretching, and then it's starting to contract and hold. So what are we doing? We're activating the muscle, but is it through a full healthy range of motion? Are they actually performing that stretch? So the idea of, oh, we need to stretch or we're going to get hurt. No, particularly for this population. Again, are they actually stretching the muscle? Most of the time that I've seen in the last 20 years, no. And also they don't need to. You need to mobilize the muscles around the joint that's moving. So I think it's a big misconception that we need to start off by stretching. Now, if you have someone who just needs to fill that time and pretend that, oh, we're going to stretch to warm up. Yeah, if you're going to pretend, go nuts, do whatever you want. It's not going to be effective. So I'm going to show some of the things that we use in autism fitness programming that are effective and that do create a situation in which our athlete can improve their mobility and their motor planning. Sounds good, right? We can work on a couple different things at the same time. And we have exercises that do just that. So I'm going to go to my share screen. So first, we have this young man who is doing a single leg hurdle step, one of my favorite go-to warm-up exercises. This is something that we have in just about every single program. And the key to any effective exercise at a base level is its scalability. Can we make it more complex and more challenging for an athlete? Can we simplify it and make it less challenging so that the athlete doesn't go into some type of compensatory movement pattern where the technique, where the performance of the exercise is starting to break down, because that's counter to what we are supposed to be doing as coaches and professionals, which is providing the best quality movement, not just an exercise, here you go, now do it, and automatically it's going to be good, because it does not work that way. Now, here we have a hurdle step. However, I do not have hurdles. I have these cones. This guy, when he was first starting out, and I'll show you how he's progressed. When he first started out, the hurdles were a little too tall for him. And the reason that I like this single leg hurdle step is we get a lot of really nice hip flexion, meaning the knee is coming up, the hip is flexing, everything around that hip is active. So we have flexion, we have extension, and this great movement pattern that many of our athletes need, particularly in the beginning of a session when they have, I don't know, maybe been sitting all day. So here we have a single leg hurdle step, and gonna hit play here. So you can see the knee is getting up there. He's going into some pretty nice hip flexion, turns around. And again, with that left leg, he's stepping over. So the idea is to get the knee up to at least 90 degrees where we have sufficient hip flexion. And we see hip flexion again if we're doing cone touches, which is another warm-up exercise. And then when we get into some of our strength-based movements, particularly the squat, right? So we are warming up the hips and the trunk to a lesser extent to prepare the body for the squats that are going to come later. Now, the next exercise, and oftentimes both in our programming for warm-ups and strength, we even throw power movements into this. We use supersets, which is exercise A and exercise B done back to back. So here he has a mobility exercise with the single leg cone step or hurdle step, and then we're using a stability exercise. Don't worry, the lighting will get better here, in this bear hold. Now, the bear hold is an important exercise as a bridge between the bear crawl with the knees down and the bear walk with the knees up. So if we have an athlete who is not yet capable and is engaging in compensatory movement, not their fault, they just don't have the physical ability to do the full bear walk yet, the way that we bridge it and get to that point is by building mobility and motor planning with the bear crawl, that's with the knees down, and then we do this bear hold. So we have this static hold, looks kind of like a plank, doesn't it? All right, with this static hold, and over time, this video is a couple weeks old, over time we have the athlete get their knees lower and lower, we get that spine more neutral, get those hands to rotate out a little bit more so that we have a more neutral position, which is what we want, ideal for shoulder and elbow and wrist stability. And then we have this wonderful exercise for abdominal and core stability. So we're supersetting a mobilization exercise with the single leg hurdle step with this stabilizing exercise, because he's not moving here. This is a static contraction. This is a static exercise. He's staying right here for 5 to 10 seconds. no good reason to hold it like 30 or 40 seconds. 10 seconds is good. And then we come back to the mobility exercise. So this is a great, what we would call a superset here for this particular athlete. So that's one way that we can incorporate two different exercises, a locomotive exercise and then a static exercise. And again, no stretching here. This is far more effective. So you can throw stretching out tomorrow. It is not, from everything I've seen over the last 20 years, we're far better off providing our athletes with mobilization and motor planning exercises first than spending time static stretching. All right. I'd love to debate that with somebody someday. I don't think I'll get the opportunity to. All right. Second video we got here, our same young athlete. This is a cone touch. So whereas we have an open chain hip flexion exercise, so the foot, meaning the foot coming up off the floor with the hurdle or cone step, now we have the athlete moving towards the ground, right? And it's not quite a squat, but it is a level change exercise. It's a quarter or a half squat with the cone touch. And what we're looking for here, this guy likes to do it with both hands, and he likes to just slap the cone. I don't know what his deal is with slapping the cone, but it's reinforcing for him. You can see he's all about it. Don't know why, but cool. If it's motivating for him and if it's appropriate, then we'll just go with it. So what's neat about the cone touch is we have a locomotive exercise that also involves level change, meaning going from tall or standing down to squatting or half squatting. This is not a squatting exercise. So we don't want the athlete to stop, squat, and then move. We want the athlete moving for the entirety of the exercise. So we want lowering cone touch, lowering cone touch. You see, he's got a really nice pattern going here. Step, cone touch, step, cone touch, and he's a little bit more advanced here. So you can see that the cones get lower as they go. Bunch of different variations we can do with this. The key to variation is the athlete has to satisfy the prerequisite skill first. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to start progressing it. We never progress until the athlete has met the standard, because they're not going to get anything out of it. That's the whole thing about progressing or varying an exercise. If we vary the exercise before the athlete is actually ready, they're not going to get anything out of the exercise. They may do it, they may be motivated, they may be engaged, but it's not going to look very good because there's going to be some compensation. Either they're moving too quickly through it, or form is breaking down, all of these things that are undesirable and are not going to provide us with the outcomes that we want for our athletes. So here is a progression. Now we've got the hurdles going on here, and the athlete is stepping over. You see that big, beautiful step right there, getting those knees up high. This guy has got it. So that would be a progression when we start to bring the hurdles higher. And when we get them taller, then obviously the knee has to come up higher. So if we're not seeing compensation, the athlete is able to step over it and then come on back and have a full conversation with me afterwards. Then we can keep it at this progression. And in the Autism Fitness Level 1 curriculum, we have a set of standards to, number one, take the guesswork away from you as a professional or as a provider of fitness programming, whether you are a parent, family member, and to give you key indicators of when it is appropriate to progress or make an exercise more challenging. And I will say, with warm-up exercises, we don't need to make them too challenging. They're still warm-up exercises. So here we see this beautiful hip flexion, great step. And another question that comes up regularly is, how far away should the hurdles be? We want them about stride length. So it's going to vary depending on how tall the athlete is. So that's a little bit on warm-up exercises. I gave you a few there. You have your hurdle steps for hip mobility and locomotion. You have that bear hold that we do as a static movement to build stability and strength. If the athlete cannot yet complete that full bear walk, I'll do another video on that in the future. And then we have our cone touches. These are three great warm-up exercises that, oddly enough, don't involve static stretching, but promote healthy range of motion, healthy flexibility. And we have to be careful with that term also, because do all athletes need more flexibility? No, they don't. If they're already hypermobile or have plenty of flexibility, the idea is not to build more and more flexibility. We don't need them Stretch Armstronging out. Stretch Armstrong, I know, is an older reference, but it makes sense here, and you can look that up afterwards. And before that, you can go to Autism Fitness and register now to become an Autism Fitness Level 1 Pro. So you've got 3 exercises to go with. Again, that bear crawl and the bear hold would be our prerequisites to doing the bear walk correctly. I'm Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, leading the movement for movement. And if you are ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, the link is down there. Just click on it and you can join me for an upcoming Level 1 virtual, or for 2023 in-person hands-on practical. I'm out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. And thank you for sharing with people who could really benefit from this. Okay, cool. I'm out.